ready to keep you company wherever you are. Blanche, the podcast, brings you immersive, hard-hitting stories anytime, anywhere, every week.
Welcome to another episode of the WholeWeek Wrap with Daily Maverick and Carte Blanche. Joining us this week is Daily Maverick journalist Nonkululeko Njilo. Here's what's coming your way. Hospitals under siege. Why it's time to pay attention to cyber attacks on healthcare systems. From chatbots to image generators and transcription tools, AI is here to stay, and South Africans are loving it.
It does look like it's helpful in many ways. It is reducing the workload, but personally, I'm not there yet.
Then protests in Kenya continue as the youth say no more. Later, how a simple tech solution is keeping moms-to-be safe. And why a Hilux Bucky named Edna captured the hearts of many. But first, why did a seemingly solid GNU fall to pieces within a matter of hours? And what does it say about the future under a coalition government? Nonkululeko, welcome back to the show. It feels like it's been forever since we last had you with us. How have you been?
I have been great. Thank you for having me once again.
It's always lovely hearing your voice. Now, talk about a dramatic week. On Tuesday last week, it was all systems go as insiders started saying the ANC and the DA had reached an agreement. But by Wednesday, we started hearing whispers, that, things are a bit shaky. It doesn't look very promising. And then Thursday morning, things had clearly fallen to pieces as the DA suddenly threatened to even leave the GNU if they don't get the position of Trade and Industry Minister, along with 3 other portfolios. Talk about a mess.
It is quite a hot mess. And just to add on what you were saying, on Thursday night, we actually had a special federal executive meeting convened by the DA, which was obviously aimed at addressing this latest impasse. It was quite shocking because I think as soon as there was an announcement to say the ANC, DA and IFP had signed into this government of national unity, we had expected that shortly after that we would have a cabinet.
Yes, but clearly there is a trust issue here as well, from what I can gather. And understandably so. Essentially, you have the DA saying that it wants to have as much oversight as possible. And I understand why, when it comes to the portfolios that matter in terms of turning the economy around, and with the ANC's track record, it makes complete sense. But I do agree with Ramaphosa's statement he made in the letter that he addressed to DA leader John Steenhuisen on Thursday, where he said, quote, "The DA seemed to want to set up a parallel government that would operate outside the framework and parameters of the constitution-based method and protocols of running the government of the Republic of South Africa," end quote.
No, absolutely. This is indeed a government of national unity. So we've all got to play a role. And I do agree that those parallel structures would not work. But at the same time, I do understand where the DA is coming from. If you are saying we must co-govern, surely I must be able to deliver to my constituency as well. Because you remember, when the DA goes out there to campaign, they make promises to the electorate, the same way the ANC has done. But I guess the issue at the end of the day is how do we then find one another, which is something they've not been able to do. But I think going forward, it will be interesting to see what they eventually resolve on, because ultimately this government of national unity, and I think this is something that a lot of political experts have been saying, they've said it's not going to be perfect. And quite frankly, I don't think anybody expects it to be. It will be highly contested. It will be tested. We are still going to see a lot of differences in opinion. We are going to see a lot of different interpretations on how to pursue policy, and obviously some serious jostling in government. So it is quite a long road ahead.
Yes, absolutely. And I was just about to bring up the factor of policy, because that was also brought up in the letter written to John Steenhuisen, that in terms of the policies that the GNU needs to agree on, this is BEE, land reform and so forth, it seems like there is a lot of contention there as well about how to move forward in getting these policies in place so that everyone is happy.
Yeah. So I think it boils down to compromise. What do you feel most strongly about? So if you feel about X, then we can compromise on Y. So I think they've got to be really matured about this one, because the voters following the May 29 election really sent out a strong message to say, we want you to work together. So they've got no choice but to actually get into the table and discuss the shape and form in which this is going to happen. And I think one of the clauses in that document that they signed states that you need about 60% of the parties within the GNU for any policy to be advanced or scrapped and all of that. Like I said earlier, they've got a long way to go.
Nearly 80% of South African businesses experienced a ransomware attack in 2023, and experts warn that things are only going to get worse. Now, as the National Health Laboratory Service is forced to go offline amid a crippling cyber attack, we ask whether South Africa and the world is actually equipped to tackle this growing threat.
On to cyber news, and this one is pretty devastating for the country's health sector. On Tuesday, the National Health Laboratory Services, or the NHLS, confirmed that all its internal and external IT systems were offline following a ransomware attack. Now, the NHLS manages a massive network of labs across South Africa, and these labs test samples coming in from the public health sector. So this is everything from blood tests to saliva to spinal fluid to really anything you can think of. And while clinicians are still able to get their lab results telephonically, physically phoning into the lab and asking, hey, can you give me the results of patient X? This shutdown has slowed things down significantly. And on Wednesday, several medical staff started raising the alarm about hospitals filling up as they just couldn't discharge patients without the necessary test results. What's your take on this and ransomware attacks that are seemingly on the increase on state infrastructure?
I think it is a huge crisis on our healthcare system, and I suppose one that we could never have prepared for, and that I feel going into the future, we are not capacitated to deal with. If you think about the previous attacks that we've had, similar attacks, I did get a sense that you were not equipped to sort of deal with them. We've had a lot of instances where information was breached and all of that. And I'm tempted to just make an example about the United Kingdom that recently experienced this. I think it was in June, where data, similar thing to us, was hacked by, I think, the Russian hackers or something like that. And it had huge implications because patients had to wait up to 6 months for blood results. If you think about it in the South African context, where we have a shortage of resources, where the fiscus is quite constrained. So it is quite concerning and alarming.
Yes, because, hospitals in the United States and the UK, as you've just mentioned, have experienced numerous cyber attacks in recent years. And experts are saying this could become more prevalent as hospitals are often left with no choice really but to pay these massive ransom demands, which is essentially where the NHLS is finding itself. And I found a shocking statistic when I was reading up on this. The average payout amount that these ransomware attackers are receiving has jumped from around $5,000 for a single attack to $1.5 million in the last year. And hospitals in these countries have paid up, and experts are saying, please don't do that, because you're encouraging these cyber attackers to continue and to just up their game, really. So for me, back in South Africa, I can't help but wonder whether government is really prepared to defend its systems against cyber criminals. I mean, the US isn't coping with it. The UK is clearly not coping with it. So I'm wondering if it even features in terms of cybersecurity, if that even features in policy making in South Africa.
Actually, I am not aware of it featuring in the policy conversation in the country. It would be interesting to see if the countries like the US and the UK are struggling. What more for South Africa, which is relatively poor or less developed compared to those countries. And I think if we look at the other attacks in general, there has not been a sense that we are equipped to deal with.
From writing a formal letter to summarizing vast amounts of data at lightning speed to creating unique designs and presentations seemingly out of thin air. Generative AI is part of our daily lives in so many ways. And while developed countries such as Japan, the UK, the Netherlands, and the US are kicking against the idea of bots in the workplace, a new survey has found that South Africans are far more open to sharing their workload with artificial intelligence.
We've discussed AI on this show a number of times, and the response from your Daily Maverick colleagues has been pretty mixed. Some are hesitant about the idea of AI in our daily lives, while others from the Daily Maverick crew are eager to see AI and what it has to offer and incorporating it in their daily work life. And it turns out that the majority of South Africans share that positive view. A recent worldwide survey by Boston Consulting Group found that South African workers are among the most optimistic when it comes to generative AI. So that's basically things like ChatGPT. You input a prompt and it throws something out for you and it's created whatever you wanted it to create. I am one of those individuals who recognizes the endless possibilities of AI and how it really can make daily tasks much simpler and more efficient. So I've been very open to the idea. I've tried to include it as much as I could. How do you feel about AI in your day-to-day work life?
Look, I am open to the possibilities, but not for myself, if that makes sense at all. So I'm okay for people to be using AI, but I don't personally feel comfortable. And I'll tell you why. So we work in a space where, for instance, plagiarism is considered a serious offense. So I don't know where do you then blur the line to say this constitutes of plagiarism or not.
Yes.
I mean, if you can get ChatGPT to write an entire article for you, that is surely not your work. Surely you need to credit them for that kind of thing. So I think I'm still trying to find myself. I'm still trying to strike a balance in terms of what's allowed and what's not. And fortunately, this is a conversation we are having in the newsroom in terms of what we can do and what we can't do. But yeah, I'm happy for those who use it. Because it does look like it's helpful in many ways. It is reducing the workload, but personally, I'm not there yet.
So for me, I use AI-based transcription tools even when I'm producing this podcast. And it's really cut down on the time I spend having to take out filler words or any kind of mistakes. So that has helped me immensely. I've also found a really interesting stat when I was reading up on this and found in this survey that about 58% of respondents said that AI has saved them about 5 hours per work week, which is a lot if you think about it. And about 80% of those surveyed also said it improved their work quality because they were less stressed about getting things done. It reduced the time they spend on admin, which I'm all for. The less admin I have to do, the better. And it also enabled them to focus more on the important stuff because they don't have to spend hours working through admin kind of tasks. So there's a lot of possibility there just in terms of making daily tasks easier. I'm not saying we should get AI to write entire articles for us because firstly, there's the fact-checking issue around that. But also, as you've just said, like when does it become plagiarism, right? And when does it become not your work? So there's still a lot to be discussed, especially in the newsroom. But I'm all for saving time and making life easier.
No, I'm all for it as well. But I'm just saying I don't think I'm there yet. I just need to, I don't know if familiarize myself is the right word or just get it through my thick skull. But anyway, I've always been a late bloomer. But adding on to what you're saying, I think because there's already statistics that suggest that people are keen to use this kind of technology, I think then employers now have the honors to sort of regulate this kind of technology, especially in the kind of industry that we work in, around when it's your work, when it's not your work. But I do think employers have a role to play because people are wanting to use this technology. So they've got no choice but to sort of better understand this technology and obviously its role in the type of businesses that they find themselves in.
The Kenya Finance Bill protests, referred to online as #RejectFinanceBill 2024, brought the East African country to its knees on the 18th of June. The bill, officially introduced in May this year, would have seen Kenya's citizens heavily taxed, yet another blow to a country already experiencing escalating living costs and struggling to manage its growing debt problem. A week into the violent protests, the Kenyan government withdrew the bill that initially sparked the outrage. But by then, it was too late. Now dubbed the Million People March, Kenyans are demanding accountability.
I want to quickly cover some international news, and I've been keeping an eye on Kenya in the last week or so, and with the ongoing protests happening there. And these protests obviously stemmed from a controversial finance bill, which would have led to insane tax hikes on pretty much everything, really, from toilet paper to food to petrol to your salary. Like it was just a crazy move by the Kenyan government. But on the 26th of June, Kenyan President William Ruto announced he's scrapping the bill, but people by then were already riled up, and now mostly young protesters have vowed to continue their rallies, with one protester telling the New York Times that, quote, "It's like politicians aren't feeling our pain," end quote. And their anger is now primarily fueled by Kenyan authorities' violent response to the protests. At the time of this recording, I think there were at least 5 people that had been killed and hundreds injured. One expert said the focus of the protests has now shifted from socio-economic reasons to public intolerance of corruption and police repression. Now, what do you make of what's unfolding in Kenya? And do you think we'll see similar uprisings in the coming years across the globe, but in Africa mostly, as the youth start to realize that, you know what, we have a voice and things clearly are not working, so we want to change that?
No, certainly, especially in the African context, I do think we're going to see a rise of these incidents. Like, as you correctly pointed out, that the youth are realizing that actually we do have a voice, we do have power to change things around. So I do think in the next coming years or months, there will be things like that. Especially, I think the case of Kenya is quite extraordinary because we've seen the president actually withdrawing this controversial bill, which was meant to come into effect this week. So I do think it tells a story on its own, that it's possible, that it's doable, that we don't have to live in frustration, in despondency.
I think that decision by the president to withdraw this bill almost emboldened the protesters to now feel that, you know what, we were able to change that. What else can we change? Let's continue, and we start demanding more accountability and responsible governance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, just to add on what you were saying earlier, I think for me, there was an expectation that following the withdrawal of this controversial bill, the protest would sort of come to an end. But this has not been the case, unfortunately. In fact, the situation does look like it remains tense and volatile. So on Thursday, we did see hundreds of these protesters taking to the streets. But this time around, not for the previous reason, which was obviously the bill, but they are now calling for the president, William Ruto's removal.
As the climate crisis worsens, experts warn that we could soon begin to see a sharp increase in disease outbreaks due to flooding, respiratory conditions as a result of air pollution, and deaths related to prolonged exposure to heat. But by partnering with the South African Weather Service, government hopes to at least limit the negative impact extreme weather could have on pregnant women across South Africa. And it's all thanks to tech.
On to our green shoots. The first one I want to touch on is, this was an article that I found on Bekisisa, where they recently published a very interesting piece on how local government plans to better protect pregnant women against extreme weather events. Now, in short, the Department of Health has partnered with the Clinton Health Access Initiative to send early warnings about dangerous weather to expectant mothers via its messaging service, Mom Connect. And I think this is such an innovative way of ensuring not only that people are safe during extreme weather events, but also that it encourages better healthcare for mothers across the country, which is just great. I love that.
Absolutely. No, we've got to commend that level of innovation, which is really desperately needed in this country.
Yeah, and I read that it covers about 420,000 active users on Mom Connect. So that's a lot of mothers that you are reaching. It really enables moms across the country to really care for themselves, because it also provides tips. So it's not just a warning system, but it also provides tips on how to remain safe during these times. So for instance, if there's a heat wave, it will send them tips and information on dehydration and overheating and tips on how to remain healthy during flooding and accessing food and safe water. So, I mean, this is really very helpful, especially in the rural areas. And another plus from this Mom Connect service is that it also helps clinics and hospitals in the affected areas to be better prepared for an influx of people or mothers who are seeking help. So this is great overall, and I really, really hope that it picks up and really becomes a permanent fixture in our healthcare system.
Yeah, I mean, especially rural areas, like you correctly pointed out, because as much as we are all at risk, pregnant women are at an added risk. I mean, we've seen studies showing that long periods of hot days, for instance, are linked to bigger chances of early births, stillbirths, and all of that, especially in low-income countries. So I do think this is the kind of innovation we need throughout the country.
Their journey across the African continent started on the 13th of March. 3 young doctors from London set off on the trip of a lifetime as they jumped into their 2010 Toyota Hilux Bakkie named Edna and crossed paths with wildlife and corrupt officials. Their goal, to reach the city of Cape Town. Documenting their adventure online, the crew and Edna soon became a firm favorite among avid social media followers. Nonkululeko was one of those who followed their great trek.
Now, you brought our second green shoe to my attention, and I didn't even know about this until you mentioned it. Tell us about the amazing journey of these 3 doctors and their Hilux Bakkie called Edna. I love this. This was such a fun story.
I was so invested in the story, so I followed the guys. I don't know how I bumped into them, but I started following their journey on TikTok and Instagram. So this is it's a remarkable story of endurance by 3 friends who happened to be doctors in London. So they embarked on a trip to South Africa using the road. Their road. Imagine, I'd never even drive to KZN 6 hours. But these 3 guys traveled more than 179 hours, covering a distance of more than 13,000 kilometers, traveling to the mother city in Cape Town. The reason I say it's a story of remarkable endurance and determination is because, they had quite a lot of challenges along the way, but they just soldiered on. So I remember their trip almost ended when they reached Nigeria because their vehicle, which was known as Edna, kind of took a strain and split in half as a result of mechanical problems. So at the time, there was a lot of uncertainty in terms of whether or not they would still be able to continue with their trip, whether they would fly to South Africa and things like that. But they were adamant to say, no, we cannot leave our car here. It's part of us. I remember at some point, Toyota South Africa offered to send them another vehicle to complete their journey. But they chose to stick with Edna, saying, we cannot abandon Edna. She is our mother and she's part of the crew. So yeah, I thought that was very lovely. And I don't know if I may have mentioned that they faced a lot of dangers as well, from wildlife, harsh weather, human hostility, a lot of harrowing experiences, but they soldiered on. I do think it was such a lovely experience, and I think it's something we can all take lessons from, because eventually they got to the mother city and the rest was history.
Yeah, and I've been informed that having made it to Cape Town, Edna, the Bakkie, is now enjoying her much-deserved retirement. I've been told that she has officially retired, so well done, Edna.
No, well done. Edna did the most.
No, absolutely.
Carried them.
Definitely. Well, it's been a jam-packed show today, and I really enjoyed every second of it. Thank you so much for joining us, and I really hope you have a wonderful week ahead.
Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I cannot wait to join you guys again.
Thanks for listening. Catch us again next week for another WholeWeek wrap. Until then, why not join the conversation on Twitter, Facebook, and everywhere else? We always love hearing from you.